Oh, always forget when I'm live. So hello, peace be upon you. That's the ancient way of saying I wish you are, I hope you're doing really well, and peace be upon you means also, let's say, I hope you have inner peace. It's actually an ancient way that's shared between Christianity, Judaism, Islam, maybe some other religions as well. You never know. I'm not an expert on every single religion, but I do have some idea about them. And that kind of leads me into a bit more of an intro about what this show is about. This is about digging out the ancient truths that we've known all along to help us find happiness in our lives and happiness for everybody else. And I think there are a lot of answers out there that we've totally forgotten in the West, and which is why it is an epidemic, not just of corona. Well, corona is a pandemic, but an epidemic of depression and sadness, in spite of all the wealth and all the things we do already have. So that's a bit of an intro. What else have I got to say? There's so many things when I talk to friends about this show, they bring up, for example, how can you have all the answers? Or I like to talk to people who are honest and say they don't necessarily have all the answers. So what I like to say about that is, well, first of all, like I just said, I think some of the things we think are really impossible to know, there are a lot of simple answers out there, and you can judge for yourself if those answers are good answers or not, logically. And the other thing is, sure, I don't have all the answers, right? I'm only a human being. And actually, the way I see myself is a sort of a nursery school of nursery school or kindergarten, if you're watching, outside the UK, school level teacher of happiness. I just know the basics, and the basics cover most of the world's problems. So sure, there are some things I don't know, but there hopefully be a lot of answers that will help you or be of use to you. So that's that. Another thing is that I think there's one thing that is not always made clear in these shows is that I have certain topics that you can see over here sideways: anxiety, COVID, vaccine, democracy, things like that. But actually, I don't really care about those topics. I'm much more interested in hearing from you and having a conversation with you. You don't have to even ask me questions about these topics. Anything to do with life affects our happiness. So I'm really interested in hearing what you've got to say, what your questions are, what's important to you. And that will make it really, really interesting, because I asked a friend the other day, what do you think about my show? And he said it was boring. Okay, I tried my best to watch it, but it's boring. But when I spoke to him at an individual level, he found what I had to say really interesting, because he was talking about what he was interested in. So make this your show, ask your questions. Yeah, let's get started. So one of his suggestions, the person who said it was boring, was to have a spinning wheel. So that's new for this show. So you should know every show is an experiment. There's something changing every single time. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but this is one of them. So I'm going to attempt to turn the microphone towards the speakers up there, and you can hear the wonderful sound effects that come out of the spinner while I click it. Oh, there you go. It's waiting for that. Woo! Should join in with the applause and stuff, right? Okay, so yeah, that was his idea. He's a big fan of something called Dude Perfect, and apparently they have a wheel, and he wanted me to have a wheel. So there you go. And I thought it might be interesting, because some of the other feedback I get is that people forget what I'm talking about. So I'm going to keep that wheel on there. It's pointing at anxiety. So we're going to have fun talking about anxiety for the next 20 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes. So I've been going through these different groups to find out on Facebook and things like that what it is that people are interested in. And the other day, somebody posted this graphic with 9 or 10 different ways of being anxious or suffering from anxiety. Now, that might not sound exciting to you. It's definitely exciting for me because there are so many, not just solutions for it, but like the flip side of solving these problems is happiness. So that's why I'm excited about it. And one particular one of those 9 or 11, I don't know how many ways of being anxious or suffering from anxiety was overthinking. So I'm going to try to focus on that for a little bit, but you can, uh, move on to anything you like. Okay. So what is the root cause of overthinking? Why do people overthink? So there's a couple of things. There's this constant rat race of feeling you're never enough, keeping up with the Joneses and all this kind of stuff. So that's one element of why we overthink and we can't stop thinking. And people have this desperate need nowadays to, what do they call it? Be in the moment. People just can't feel that because they're always chasing something else. And that comes to the spiritual answer to this particular problem, and that is in the Quran, which is the guidebook for Muslims, but actually for all of humanity, because Islam, I just want to give a quick introduction, is a strange religion because it's a religion that says you got to believe in Christianity if you're a Muslim. You got to believe in Judaism if you're a Muslim and stuff like that at their source, the original teachings, that is. So we can talk about that at some point. So anyway, in the Quran, it says that people who go after materialism, or basically the way the Quran describes it, is people who love darkness, because that's kind of darkness, unfortunately, running away from spirituality and chasing temporary things like material things. Those people are like thirsty people in a desert chasing a mirage. And I love that metaphor because a mirage is an illusion. And so, and the funny thing about this particular illusion of materialism is that when you finally get that thing that you've been chasing, I don't know, the iPhone or the ideal spouse, or I don't know what, or like success at work or something like that. When you finally get it, I've heard it so many times, it's like people just go, I'm not as happy as I imagined it would be, or it lasted for like 0 seconds and now I'm chasing the next thing. And that's why the metaphor of a mirage is so perfect, because what is a mirage? Probably, I don't know if you've experienced a mirage, but a mirage is something that's always in the distance. And you can never reach a mirage because the mirage illusion fails or disappears once you reach it. So it's just such a wonderful metaphor. The Quran also talks about other things. Says you can describe it like that, or something even much worse. But maybe I'll go into that later on. And so if you have this thing when you're constantly thirsty for something that's in the distance that you never achieve, then what's going to happen is you'll constantly be running for things, chasing things, never being quenched of your thirst. You are never going to stop being able to think, because that thinking process, all it is how am I going to finally be happy? How am I going to get that next thing? Or maybe is it the next thing? So you'd be chasing 10 different things at the same time. You're going to be exhausted. No wonder people are desperate to live in the moment. So what I love about these ancient spiritual teachings is that they make the answer so simple. And they give in-depth answers as to how to achieve them, not just like you should live in the moment, you should just stop thinking. You can't just stop thinking. Your brain is supposed to be thinking. There's a healthy way of thinking, which is, thinking about a problem but calmly, maybe thinking about some beautiful film you watch or something, or enjoying time with your friends, or reminiscing, these kind of thinking, right? Stopping your brain from thinking is probably a really bad idea. Okay, what you want to do is not exhaustive thinking or chasing or desperate, anxious kind of thinking. Hey, awesome! I have a question. So let's see what the question is. I got an unrelated question. Does God answer bad prayers for good people? Okay. For example, if it's good for the person praying, but not for others. Okay, that's an interesting question in lots of different ways. So, if you're a good person, God wants you to do well. So, this is, you can understand in a general sense, even if you have no idea of like scriptures. But if you look into the Quran, for example, and I will mainly reference the Quran, it's easier for me. I think it's the most all-encompassing religion, or the most, you could say, the most modern religion, for different reasons, because it's the first international religion for all sorts of other reasons as well. So, okay, so I'll reference the Quran mainly, and so God describes himself as, first of all, and hopefully it makes sense, the one who gives you abundantly without even asking. So it's a really kind God. Interestingly, I think it put it in a really simple way. So the way God describes himself in the Quran is actually in the feminine, which is fascinating in itself. He describes himself as Rahman, which comes from Rahim, which comes from womb. So basically, the one that just takes care of all your needs, like you're a baby. Okay, so he really wants to do well for you, and so especially if you're a good person, he wants to treat you even better. So if you're asking for something bad, that's going to be bad for you as well. So God would like steer you away from things like that. And so one thing that good people are told to pray for is to say, if this is bad for me, then please take it away from me, and if it's good for me, please make it closer to me. And I'm sure there is a famous prayer in Christianity, maybe somebody could help me, that goes along those lines. Yeah, I'm sure I've heard it in so many movies. God, Father, I can't remember the words, but there is a very famous prayer along those lines as well in Christianity as well. So God does try to make you choose better things or give you better options, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that helps. Uh, I'm just trying to think, what else would you be interested in such a question? Why would you ask that question? So, like, why, if you're a good person, why would you pray for something that's bad for other people? That's kind of the opposite of the definition of being good. So, let's make this a conversation. If that's helpful, great. If there's something that I'm missing that you really want to point out, then ask a second question. Make this a conversation. Let me find out what it is that you're really interested in, and if I've answered your question at all. Anyway, let's move back to anxiety. So I'm going to quickly go through three main points. One related to anxiety, and then I'm just going to have a drink of my tea, relax a little bit, and maybe wait for an answer. Who knows? And then I'll just go into more detail. So anxiety. So there's one thing where we're keeping up with the Joneses all the time. We're constantly chasing, and the antidote to that is not to chase materialism, but finally realize there's only one source of peace, which is God. So that's what the Quran teaches. Hearts can only find comfort in the remembrance of God. So if you're not a believer in God, a way to understand God is like Mother Earth or Mother Nature. And Mother Earth is the way a lot of I think the South American religions used to talk about God. So when you're connected with nature, don't you find peace? Yeah. And if you really do start believing in God, and it makes logical sense to believe in God, like just mathematically, probability wise, it's pretty much impossible for God not to exist. We can talk about that if you want. So when you realize there is a God, and there's a God that's constantly taking care of you and things like that, just remembering this kind God can put you at peace really immediately, that you're not alone in this world. There is a living God that can take care of you and answer your prayers. as God promises in the Quran that He will answer your prayers, especially those who are His servants, who listen to God, is what it means to be a servant. So yeah, you can just try that out, see if it works. Like, we're just sitting down one time, just remembering God, and see if it works. Do you find peace? Do you suddenly find that that you're not overthinking or panic thinking, however you want to describe it? So the other elements of why people might think too much. Wow, it's already 15 past. Okay, so I thought I was going to cover these first 3 points in about 3 minutes, but no. The second one is like when you've got a really big task and you're not sure which route to take. And again, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that when you've got a big problem to solve, just focus on the first part. And that's really wise, because just two reasons for now that come to mind is that, first of all, if you've got a really big task, you can have this thing where you're just overwhelmed by the task and you don't do anything. You're much better off doing something. Now, the second thing that happens when you do something is that you start understanding the problem better. It's like going down a twisted path into a forest. You don't really know where that path goes. You have to go further down the path to fully understand the details of the path. And any entrepreneur, because mainly entrepreneurs and people who are really successful totally understand this principle, that you just got to start acting, not overthinking, and just start doing things, and you understand the problem better. That's how you really make progress. And then there's this kind of generally the idea of difficult decisions, not necessarily big decisions, just difficult decisions. How do you handle them? So if you believe in God, you or not just believe in God, but like follow God. God promises you that God is going to be, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said. He said something along the lines as, "I am the hands with which you fight and the feet with which you walk, and I will protect you in all ways." So the point is that if the more you rely on God, the more fearless you become, because you know you're totally in the hands of God, and God continues to helps you out. And I definitely feel that all the time, and I'm nothing special. But the more you help God out, the more God gives you back 10 times more, like way more. Yeah. So that definitely is a hard one to get away from if you don't believe in God. And believing in God, as I say, is just statistically, like, you must believe in God. It's just the most reasonable thing to do. Like, just for example, there's this, I think it's called the hemoglobin enzyme. I can't remember if it's an enzyme or protein or something in between. Just to have one of those be created by a series of trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, like loads and loads of trillions of mistakes, or if you want to call it evolution, which I do believe in. Muslims believe in evolution. It's in the Quran. It's like in the beginning of the Quran, that God is described as the evolver. So for one of these things that make up which you've got lots of in a single blood cell, it would take longer than the age of the universe if it was to, let's say, go through generations of evolution every second. You just wouldn't have enough seconds to create just that one thing, never mind a whole human being. So what I'm just trying to point out, and if you ever look at video of enzymes at work or proteins at work, whatever, they're like these molecular machines. And it's just insane to even imagine that these kind of things could have happened by sort of accidental evolution rather than what believers in God believe in, which is guided evolution. And that's a very interesting topic in itself. So, yep, I think let's have a go at pressing that button again, but I think I'll have a little break. Listen, everybody, just ask a question. Please just ask a question. I don't want to be boring. I don't want to be, as my friend said, monologuing. Just ask me a question. It will make the whole thing more interesting for you. Maybe you'll pick a topic that nothing to do with this spinning wheel thing, by the way. It can be anything you want about life. I'm very casual, we do this every week. Yeah, it just really doesn't matter, like, what you ask. Since we're doing this, yeah, I had this thing that I didn't want people to think that I was covering my head and that's why I was wearing this hat, but somebody suggested it's better to wear this hat because it reflects. Well, I don't know why he said it. He said it looks smart. There's a friend who I get a lot of feedback. Well, do I get a lot of feedback? I get a lot of feedback, at least from one person anyway. And he said wear the hat, so I listened to him. Fair enough. But I didn't want to wear the hat for a little bit in the beginning of the show because I felt like maybe deep down inside I was covering this weird haircut that I did for myself, which I did a video about. Why did I cut my hair off like that? You can check out that video. Maybe just be a subscriber and check out my daily videos, 1-minute videos. Okay, here we go. You know what I should have done? Who cares really if I didn't do it? I should have deleted anxiety now that I've covered it. But here we go. Let's I don't know if you're going to hear this, but I'll point it towards the speaker so you get some lovely sound effects of the spinner going around. Ooh. I know. Let's clap for democracy. Let's go democracy. All right. Okay. So this time I'll remove it. Okay, cool. Now I've got two. Anyway. That was pretty close. There's almost anxiety again. Would you like to hear more about anxiety? Who knows? All right. Okay. So let's put this over here. I try to like point it this way because otherwise I end up breathing too much into the speaker, the microphone rather. Who knows? I have no idea what I'm doing, by the way. So let's see. We are talking about democracy. So why are we talking about democracy? Because a lot of people in the Western world are pretty disappointed with how democracy is working out in a whole bunch of different reasons. One reason is why don't we ever get like politicians we can trust? Not everybody believes that. Some people are pretty happy with the people they get, but after a while they kind of feel a bit disappointed. So that's an interesting question in itself. And I like to give the brief answer straight away so people can maybe react or think about it. It's like these politicians are just a reflection of what's happening in society. Yeah. So if you've got chaos and people, a lot of corruption and things like that, then that is exactly the time when you're going to get corrupt politicians. Imagine if you had, let's just be a little bit hypothetical. If everybody was a lovely person, then, there's not much space for corrupt politicians to come up or dishonest politicians to come up. Okay. And how about if we actually have proper communities in the world, where people knew their neighbors and then they got together as communities and said, you know what, in our community, this person is a really trustworthy guy. Let him, be our local leader and then eventually maybe become prime minister or president or whatever it is you have in your country. Yeah. So my short answer is it's your fault. Yeah, it's our fault. We got to sort this out. Okay. And the only way you're going to sort it out, it's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to be things like this show where people learn principles of how to live together, because this happiness stuff really is about, world peace, living together. And in fact, all these good things like world peace, economic peace, all these other things, they can only happen if at the basic level there is individual peace. Because we as individuals are the building blocks of society. Without that, you have, craziness, yeah, and depression and all that kind of negative stuff. So that's my short answer. It's all really up to us. And pointing fingers at politicians is not really going to help. Just like I think protests are really a waste of time, because I think anybody who's been to a lot of these protests know, and this is not just me saying, other people have been saying this. They're just one huge big party, and what happens is when you've done your protest, you go home and say, great, I did a protest, but the energy fizzles out. What's really hard to do, but the only thing that is really effective in every aspect of our life, is to be consistent day by day and saying, this is what we're going to do to change the world, not just complaining on one day and say you've done your bit. Yeah, then I'm sure governments are very aware of this reality. It's just that we need to wake up to those realities. That's why governments, like when we had possibly the biggest protest of all time in England against, was it the Iraq war? I can't remember which war it was now. Okay, like 2 million, 1 million people in London, and the war just went on ahead because they knew that we weren't serious enough to stop this war. And if we were really serious enough, Barry, we would have, elected another government, because we can. Potentially, we can. If we got together, we could elect governments that we actually like. Let's put it this way, that we can actually trust as a whole people. Because that's all you hear at the moment, all the time. It's those politicians. No, it's you. It's you that's failed, and we need, or say we that have failed, and we need to fix it. So that's one point. Let's move on to another point. I'm just trying to think, what other ideas did I have about democracy? Do protests work? No, I don't think so. Why can't we elect an honest politician? We could if we were all good, and or we had enough good people to choose from. Sometimes we overrate ourselves of how good we are. Like if you see there's politics at work, isn't it? And there's lots of things that are not done right, and we don't stand up to those things because it doesn't suit us. We don't want to lose our jobs and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so when that doesn't happen just right on your doorstep, right in front of you, or if you're part of it, which is, there's a massive chance that you are yourself corrupt at some point, at some level, doing something isn't quite right, then how can you expect anybody who has got more power to behave them? Because just power just magnifies your ability to misbehave. That's all. So if they're doing something wrong, it's just because they've got more power and it shows more. But you're basically the same thing. Tell me if I'm wrong. Be interested. Now, the other thing we're not too happy about democracy about, or there's a whole discussion about, is like, shouldn't we have stronger governments? Because you see this kind of modern version of democracy, because democracy, how it's been defined, has been changing since the beginning. Like the first version of democracy in ancient Greece, I don't even like to call it the first version of democracy. I think Islam had... No, sorry. Let me put in order. No. Okay, let's not go into that debate. But that would be completely wrong, getting my history the wrong way around chronologically. So that was totally wrong in my head. The first definition of democracy was like only intelligent people, only men, and only, I don't know what, like property owners or something could vote in this small area called Athens or something. So democracy, the definition of it has always been changing. So we should be kind of open to different ideas of democracy in itself. But let's just say the modern definition of democracy seems to be not let government get on with its business of running the country. Government constantly needs to please the people to get on with anything. And so what happens is this constant people pleasing for short-term benefit. So governments don't do what's good for the country at that rate. If you're going to keep protesting and complaining, and every time there's a difficult decision to be made, they're just going to do things to get, into government or power again in the next session or however it works in your country. So, and a lot of people are looking up to China now, because they do lots of bad things. Let's say we don't accept the bad things they're doing, like the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims and stuff like that. But there are, positives to strong government, I suppose. They managed to get rid of COVID. Is that an argument for that? They just get the job done. They even get ahead in lots of areas of technology, just organize what should be done and get on with it. So I'd love to hear your opinion on that. So this is supposed to be me talking about spiritual ideas that help us in answering all these big questions. And so in Islam, we're told that even if your leader has this brain the size of a raisin or something, it basically is really stupid, you still need to follow that person as long as he doesn't contradict your religious teachings, etc. Because the highest ruler of all is God, so you listen to God. But there is very, very rare cases when anywhere in Europe there's any cause to say that we're not allowed to follow our religion. I would say in England it's kind of the opposite. I'm so impressed when I go to different schools, when I'm teaching in different schools, they actually have places for Muslims to pray, or everybody to pray. So they are very accommodating in Europe, or at least in England. So what I'm saying is, let government get on with the business of running the country and obey them, and that would solve huge number of problems. For example, in countries where people just listen to their government and lock down properly and not secretly going visiting family and just breaking the law left, right, and center, then what happened was that they got rid of COVID. Like, it just disappeared really quickly. Like, we've been stuck in England with COVID for like a year or something. Ridiculous. Even in the Isle of Man, which is just part of the UK, they managed to deal with it. They were just quite tough. They said, like, if you break the rules about the lockdowns, which is, if you're not sure what maybe British people call it lockdowns, okay, it just means like stay in your house, or don't mix up with other people and keep spreading the COVID-19. So Isle of Man, they were really strict about it, about this lockdown, and they said, if you're breaking the rule, we'll send the police and send you in prison. But actually, once they said that, most people just kept to the rules, because people just do need to know there are some consequences. Don't say there are no consequences, I hope you'll behave. That kind of doesn't work. And then once people know there's rules, they just follow them usually. And it's a shame that I think we've been quite soft on the rules, like starting up schools again and again, saying, oh, people will be unhappy that kids are not in school and the parents have to take care of them while being at work, working from home. But if we just did that for a short period of time, we would do really well. Let's talk about COVID, because COVID properly, I think. Let me see. You've got 7 minutes on this. Let's talk about this more if you want. Any points you want to make about this would be great. Maybe I'll pick up a comment that was made before the show. What was I looking at? I really wanted this person, Ardil. He's very good at arguing. He's probably the best person I've ever had on the show in terms of making articulate arguments in favor of whatever he wanted to say. And he loved talking about COVID and what's it called? Democracy, or the lack of it, and us being trapped in our houses and things like that. So we could talk about it. So let's just see. COVID, I don't want to talk about COVID too much. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm not reading out his message because he didn't say it publicly. Kind of did in a group. So I'm just going to summarize what he said. Okay, cool. So he's saying, freedom of individual expression should be a priority in a democracy. So is that true? So yeah, there's that's a very interesting point, in that religion mainly focuses on not individual rights but individual responsibilities. And so the reason for that, I think I'll tell a nice little story about it, and then let's see what you think. Should we focus on our responsibilities, or should we focus on our rights? Because that's what Mr. A was talking about. I probably mentioned his name already. Who knows? Anyway, so there's a great story that I learned from primary school. I still remember it. It's so deep. For me, it was deep. And it goes something like this. There was a person who came along, I don't know, I think he was the angel of death, I suppose. And he said, right, you're going to be going to heaven or hell soon. You might as well go for a quick tour. What do you think? And he said, yeah, sure. He said to the angel of death, yeah, sure, let's check it out. So they went onto a lift, and so he said, you know what, let's check out hell first, said the angel of death. So he pressed the button and he went down to hell, I suppose. And in hell, what happened was that when the doors opened, I'm probably mistelling it. I'm doing the futuristic version with a lift rather than, I don't know, something else. And he was a bit surprised when this person, when he first saw hell, because like there was a huge table with like throne-like seats around the table and loads of food in the middle. And everybody had, potentially as much food as they wanted. But then when he started looking around a bit more, he noticed that everybody's really skinny. It's like, what's going on? There's loads of food, but everybody's skinny. Very, very odd. Okay, then he looked a bit more closely and he noticed that everybody had these huge forks. Now, this is, just metaphorical and a bit silly here, but huge forks. And the only way they could eat was with these huge forks. And but they couldn't quite poke the food and get it in their mouth because the forks were so big. So yeah, they stayed hungry, and the angel of death said, "You seen enough?" And he said, "Yeah, sure, I've seen enough." So he said, "Let's go to heaven now." So he went back into the lift, pressed the button, up he went, and the doors opened, and he saw exactly the same thing. And he thought, well, almost exactly the same thing, because when he first opened the door, he saw the same huge table with the same huge food, with the same like different people around the table with their throne-like seats. And he was confused, and he looked at the angel of death and said, like, "This is heaven? You sure? Because it looks like the same thing." And the angel of death said, "Yeah, this is it." And so at first he was a bit disappointed. It's like, heaven and hell are the same thing. But again, he started looking more carefully. And what did he see? First of all, the people were happier. Okay, they were not skinny either. They still had the same huge forks, but what they did instead was they were feeding each other. So they, instead of trying to stick it in their own mouth, they were sticking it in other people's mouths. I'm not sure where the story comes from. I think I remember checking it out as some sort of famous fable. I can't remember what it was. But it's very, if you think it's just a story, it's very relevant to the reality of our world. No, there are not huge forks that we have to eat with, but people are finding through experiments, psychological experiments, social experiments, that we're actually happier when we help each other. And if you want to look at the Western world as a massive experiment, you can see what individualism does. It makes you absolutely miserable and lonely. I mean, I was just talking to my neighbor before this show, and I was like, look at this place. We're packed together in London, millions of people, and there's an epidemic of loneliness. Never mind the pandemic. That's not really the cause of it. We had a loneliness epidemic before that even happened, because we're cooped up in our homes, enjoying our lives, separated from everybody else, and we're not really enjoying it because you kind of get tired of Netflix and all that, just watching it all by yourself and all that, you know. That stuff looks like it'll make you happy, but it doesn't. And that's one of those spiritual teachings of Islam and pretty much all religions, that those things that are sort of bad for you, they're kind of like, let's say, the devil, as it were, which is not like a red guy with horns, but just somebody or something that inclines you to things that are bad, but makes you God, the devil, as it were, makes those bad things look good, and they certainly do look good if you let your ego drive you that way. Yeah, but if your ego is not big, you don't really see them as good anymore, because they become more apparent for what they are. Just like, I don't know, spend all your money chasing the lottery or something. That's not going to be good for you. You're going to be miserable. I talk to teachers who are kind of surprised that they even bother doing that. They keep saying how they keep doing it, and they keep hating it every time they lose. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, right. Yeah, I think it's time to press that button. Hey, let's go for it. Should I bother turning the mic? Let's turn the mic for your sake. Maybe it'll be a bit more entertaining. Let's go. I have to get to the right screen. Where's my pointer gone? I've got two screens going on, you see. Here you go. You ready? I hope you're as excited as those fake clappers. Okay. Yeah, whatever. So we're talking about COVID vaccines now. Another very interesting topic. Yeah, what have you got to say about that? So one thing I'm really disappointed in, and you keep getting this in sort of modern day discussions, we all jump on one side or the other and make the other person try to make the other person look as stupid as possible. And that's part of what I would look at as a sort of materialistic approach to things. Like, when you're materialistic, individualistic, I see them as the same thing. Like, when you're chasing something materialistic, you become very individualistic. You say, oh, I want this. You forget everybody else. I want the things. I don't want the people, the experience of being friends with people. I just ignore them. I'll go in the streets and wear my extremely expensive headphones and stuff, and I just noise cancelling headphones, and I ignore the world and get depressed all by myself. Obviously, that's going to happen. Okay, so I do think this kind of materialistic thing is pretty much the same as being individualistic, and it shows in the way we argue. We're not very empathetic to people, and I've heard a lot of people say things like, it serves them right if that side of the argument dies or something from COVID or something like that. All these kind of arguments. That's not the way the world's going to get better. So we got to try to understand both sides. And I'm going to attempt to, because I'm kind of on one side already, but like, we'll see. So here's one argument that I don't really hear an answer to. Hey, Salim UK 70, forget what I was going to say. Let's see. If you had a choice, which vaccine would you recommend? Okay, cool. So if I had a choice, then I just heard of this fantastic sounding vaccine, which is in Germany, made by, sort of the regular sort of process, not mRNA, which is genetically modified vaccines, which are the vaccines that we're kind of being told are our only choices. I don't know the name of it, but basically the problem is that person is being sent to prison because he's not one of the big pharmaceutical companies. And they're saying the reason why he's going to prison is because he tested it on his family members and himself, even though they gave permission. So, yeah. So that would be my answer to that question. If there was a choice, I would take that one just because it's your regular sort of vaccine, which works in the normal way the body, it works with the body, the way the body normally works. So what do I mean by that? So the body has this fighting like with like sort of attitude. So it's well known, I think, that if you want to cure a person from snake venom, then you give them a small dose of that venom. So you do what we call like with like. And so the traditional vaccines, what they do is they give you a tiny bit of the real disease, as it were, and your body goes, hey, I can handle that, bang, 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 and it remembers how to handle it. So when the real thing comes, it can sort it out. And there are loads and loads of benefits of that because, for example, these mRNA, basically RNA is kind of a piece of your DNA, not your DNA, the DNA of the disease or something. The way they actually work, these modern ones, say modern ones, I mean these special COVID ones that never been done before, in terms of mRNA have never been used for vaccines before. What they do is they don't really make something that is the disease itself. They make something that looks a little bit like it, like has the same spikes and stuff like you've been seeing all over TV that COVID is supposed to, or not COVID, the proper way of saying it is what, SARS-CoV-2 or something. I'm not going to get technical. I'm just going to call it COVID, right? So yeah, they imitate the likeness of it. So the body gets used to killing that particular likeness, but then when it comes to another strain of COVID, it doesn't know what to do, or you might get lucky and it does know what to do. But if you got the real thing, your body is a bit more adaptive. That's what I understand. So that's what I'd go for. I have another old friend asking a question. Looking forward to it. I really appreciate all the questions coming in. This is really nice of you guys. So physician Winfried Stürker developed and produced a coronavirus vaccine in his lab and administered to, yeah, this is exactly the one. Yeah, I love you, Khalid Banu. All right, I appreciate that. So that's the one I was talking about. So administered it to volunteers without getting it approved first. Yeah, so he took their approval, but not approval from the big companies or the big organizations that are kind of backing up the big pharmaceuticals. Yeah, so criminal proceedings against him are now underway. Oh, that's lovely. So instead of trying to solve this massive pandemic that we have, we're more interested in just locking this guy up for his wonderful work that has been shown to be far more effective than the vaccines we're being told to take. And I suppose just to kind of demonstrate, I don't know, should I bring this in? Yeah, I'll bring it. So sure, vaccines are great. Lots of great things about it. One of the most famous vaccines are the polio vaccines, right? Okay, polio, if you don't know, I didn't know much about it either, right? But there's a bit I do know about it. So kids only I think only 50 years ago, it's not long ago, kids were often getting polio, which meant they couldn't walk. And all sorts of problems like that. And the polio vaccine has effectively eliminated polio. Okay, now the guy who made the vaccine, didn't get any money for it. He didn't patent it, but all these big companies are patenting it. Now you might say, hang on a minute, it costs these big pharmaceutical companies loads of money. Actually, it costs the governments lots of money. They take most of the risk, and then if it works, if there's a good chance of working, then these pharmaceutical companies take over. So it's a strange deal there. I'm not sure why they do it that way, considering, governments do all the work. So like in America, it was a military operation. I can't remember the name of this operation. They produced the vaccines in America. I can't remember what it's called. I don't really go for the names. I'm not a big fan of all of them in the first place. But I really appreciate you searching that up, Khalid Banu. Maybe you've seen it yourself. This particular article that was really helpful. Let's have a little. But by the way, as I'm going to say again, really, you know what? You could ask anything about anything if you wanted to. Okay, we're going to have a little sip of tea, and let you think about a question maybe. But otherwise, I'll just carry on talking about COVID. This is great. Thank you, Salim UK70. All right. Okay, here we go. Another question. Vaccine diplomacy. Poor countries such as Palestine don't have access to vaccine, whilst these nations and children remain unvaccinated. COVID remain with us. That's an interesting argument. Okay, I'm going to say something. Yeah. Okay. So what does Islam talk about? What does Islam say about how to deal with this whole thing, right? These kind of this virus is spreading around. So absolutely fascinating for me and incredibly simple was the solution given by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, like 1500 years ago. And he said, like, it's so simple. He goes, if you hear of a plague, like we can call the coronavirus a plague. It spreads around. It's not good for you. If you hear of a plague in some place, don't go there. Okay, makes sense, right? Pretty obvious. And if you have the plague with you, where you are already in a place where there is a plague, don't flee from that place. I mean, that's less obvious, that one, don't flee from it because it's a bit, oh my gosh. But we kind of get the idea that you're going to end up spreading it. Now, if we did that, like New Zealand did, and so many other South Asian countries did, not Pakistan and India, but the other side, okay, like they just got rid of coronavirus, like just like that. So what I'm trying to say is, let's not say that vaccines are the solution. Maybe they are. Maybe because some people say, coronavirus is here to stay and we're going to have to take, the vaccines every year. I can come up with all the different permutations of what might happen, but I like, people to say it. And I really do appreciate, you guys in the comments section asking all those questions, helping me out. I really appreciate that. So, but if anybody, has an opinion on, COVID vaccines and things like that, just say so. Please, rather than me trying to guess all the different things that people might be thinking about regarding this topic. Anyway, so yeah, okay. So not all people are getting an equal share of these vaccines, which is Palestine's a particularly interesting one, considering that I think is it Israel that has the highest percentage of people vaccinated. I mean, they're pretty well known for pushing it a lot. But a lot of people complaining that they're being forced to take it as well. So I'm not sure how far along they are, but that's an interesting one. And I do agree, Salim UK70, that if the theory is that by taking this vaccination, you're going to stop spreading it, because there's two separate things. Vaccinations are supposed to stop you from getting sick, but not necessarily spreading it. And I looked into the research, and it's really not clear if it stops you from spreading it. There's some claims, but those claims are really weak claims from what I've seen. Okay, and I can talk about that. Very weak claims that it stops you from spreading COVID-19 if you take the vaccine. And there's some counter evidence, I would say, very strong counter evidence, in my opinion, that it has no such effect. So, yeah, if the claim is that this COVID vaccine is supposed to stop you from transmitting it, I don't know why in Israel, Palestine, whatever you want to call it, they don't give it to the poorer people, because then otherwise the disease is permanently with them. So interesting approach they've taken in that very, very small country. Yeah. So I mentioned there's very strong counter evidence to say that these COVID vaccines will not stop the spread of COVID, just hopefully make you less susceptible to being sick to COVID. And that is that if we say that if you've got what do they call it, the T cells and whatever, I forget the words, the things that stop you from getting sick or create your immunity, right? Then if the claim is that if you're immune means you're not going to spread it either, then look at kids. Kids are super spreaders. Okay, if you don't know what a super spreader, it means somebody spreads it a lot. Okay, they spread COVID a lot. Okay, in the UK, when the schools open, COVID just shot around the country. Like that was, you know, it went nuts. The rates of infection went nuts. Off through the roof when schools open. Okay, so and kids also are pretty much immune to COVID. So they're immune, yet they spread it. So I would say that's counter evidence. Maybe there's some fault in my logic. Now, I do want to say, because I did say in the beginning, I'm not just like one side or the other. I'm just like, let's have a proper discussion about this. Okay. So I do want to say, listen, if you are like my parents have taken it. Okay. My dad has got, diabetes and whatever. If you're older, you're more likely to get it and die from it. So not more likely to get it, just more likely to die from it. Yeah. So it makes sense to take it in that case, right? Okay. I just think, I don't think I really spent much time making it clear that the COVID vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines that we're expected to take are genetically modified. Okay, mRNA, RNA, genetic, part of your DNA. Okay, but artificially synthesized, artificially made. And we generally don't like consuming GM food, for example, never mind having it injected in us. And even when it's injected, like, it's not like the body would normally even accept it. Your body would normally try to destroy it as fast as it can, these illegal aliens, as it were, right? But they wrap it up so that it somehow gets deeper into your bodies, right into your cells. And then, as if it, DNA was as simple as Lego or something, they say, oh yeah, the mRNA will just replicate itself, and using the usual system within the body for replicating RNA and creating DNA and all this kind of stuff, it will just work because we know what we're doing. No, you don't. We don't have a clue about DNA, right? We just know that if we manipulate a few things, it's like DNA, just to be clear, is trillions and trillions and trillions, you can't put a number in it, more times more complicated than any computer program that we've made. DNA is an incredibly complicated computer program. Okay, we don't have a clue about it. What we do is you take chunks of the program, you say, oh, that seems to do this, but we don't know all the side effects, and there are loads of side effects. So for example, the AstraZeneca one, lots of blood clots and 100 other problems that don't get talked about. I don't know, somebody's skin peeling off, this and that, all sorts of weird stuff. In Germany, they don't want it because of, for young people, they don't want it in Canada, but we have to take it in the UK, right? So I just think, there could be arguments for both sides. We should listen to it and let people, make the decisions they have to. Oh, let's see. Let's just question. See, I was looking down too much, but not looking at the questions. Do you think COVID has made us more caring? Oh, I love this question. Okay, so COVID has had massive effects on society. I mean, the thing I focus on is how, because I love technology, it's in some ways it's changed us. Like, yeah, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to answer the question. So, not really, not really. I don't think there was one time I thought for a minute that it did. Okay, because we have to be a bit proactive, not just be pushed into situations. We actually have to do something. So one proactive thing we did in the UK, I don't know about, and maybe we copied from a few other countries, was the clap for heroes. I thought that was just the best, right? Okay, so for the first time, all the neighbors come out at the same time and they clap. Okay, so what's good about clapping? Nothing particularly. It's just that you actually smile at your neighbors and do things in unison as a community, and you feel connected. Okay, and on the odd occasion, people actually smile at each other, and that is the game changer. You might say, "Oh, just smiling." Well, I've talked about this before. Like, smiling is literally infectious. Infectious. When I say literally, like, you can pass on a smile just by smiling at people. I've done this experiment before. You can try it right now. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, you should smile in the face of your brother because it is charity. What is charity? Giving stuff to other people. You can give your smile to other people. So I'm kind of talking about a little bit in a kind of non-direct way, but my answer is, you got to be proactive. The world doesn't change by things just happening to you. Sometimes you're forced into situations and you can do better because of it, but I'm not convinced that it's made us more caring. I don't see how. There were small glimpses of thankfulness when we were clapping for the heroes, the NHS workers. NHS means National Health Service people, the dustbin people clear up the rubbish, and stuff like that, right? People who like keeping the country going. And being thankful is absolutely one of those religious teachings that we need to really practice. I just want to end there. I really, really appreciate everybody taking part. You guys made the show much better, I think. I really enjoyed it. I'm actually going to carry on because I'm going to go and do one more question, because I appreciate people whenever they try to help me out, and they're trying to help me out right now. So Hamid Safi says, has COVID made us think more about God? Okay, so I think so, especially in the first lockdown. Okay, it made us think about our situation. So in the first lockdown, a few months in, there were all these viral videos about animals coming back. You know, coming back to not just small towns, but just being free. And I can't remember what the details were, but like, they were like as if there was the resurgence of animals. Like, we were finally giving them breathing space, and it felt like we were appreciating that we were giving nature some a bit of space. And maybe we might have realized, once we realized we're part of nature and the bigger picture, that we might realize the biggest part of the picture, which is God. But I haven't really noticed that. I do think it often has been the case with great calamities, like earthquakes. You do hear a lot that people turn to God because it's like a shock for a while, and they go, hang on a minute, and we always knew we were little ants on this planet and not the masters of it. And now we've been put in our place, and a bit of humility, because it takes humility to connect with God, and it takes arrogance, total arrogance, just to totally ignore God, even though God is, you know, constantly taking care of us, like the clouds going around and recycling our water. Like the one that I love is how do I call it, the this force field around Earth protecting us from meteorites, electromagnetic force field. It's like crazy sci-fi stuff going on, and we totally ignore it. Like, oh yeah, it's just happening. No way is it just happening. So do I believe has COVID has made us think about God? I think if people have gone through a bit of trauma, it usually helps them. Sounds terrible, but I think it's helped us in other ways become a bit closer to our families, but some people it hasn't. Like there's a lot of problems that have just got worse, like people whose households are not doing great in the first place, they've just got worse, like what they call I can't remember violence in the home. I can't remember the name for it. Anyway, let's leave it at that. Really appreciate it. Interesting questions. Okay, I'm gonna do this one really quick. People did show. Okay, I'm gonna read out Khalid Banu's opinion on this. Let him have the last word. I think he's got an opinion there. People did show kindness and care for each other in the first lockdown and turned closer to God, but people are now reverting back to their bad habits and selfishness. Just my opinion. Usual humble Khalid Banu. Yeah, cool. And maybe you're seeing a lot of stuff I don't, like, because you're a care worker, Khalid Banu. So I know a lot. I know all these guys. Thank you very much, all of you. Peace be upon you. May you all have a great rest of the week. Please do join me next week. Hopefully you found some of what I've said to be useful.